Hello everyone, Pulse here with yet another episode of Delving Deep ESO. Now since news on this MMO is kind of slow in the current, I've decided to get back on track with doing my skill lines for the classes that are going to be in Elder Scrolls Online, and the next one up that we needed to go over was the Sorcerer, and all of the many skills and tools they have hidden away in their special little spellbooks. Now it's been a while since we did the last video about the class skill lines, so let me remind you guys of a couple things. First off, this isn't 100% confirmed and could be kind of chalked up to rumor and speculation. But what makes this worthwhile to listen to and get all the information from is that one, what they shown at QuakeCon pretty much was a mirror image of what we'd seen kind of leaked out on the internet, and two, of that leaked information, there's just so many different people and so many different testaments kind of lending itself to being true that it's definitely worthwhile in my book. And two, we also need to keep in mind that if numbers come into play, and I'm going to try my best not to talk about them, but if I mess up, and I'm sure I will, and I bring numbers into the conversation, you have to remember that the numbers are pretty arbitrary at this point. We don't know the number scaling, and we really don't know what a good number would be. So you can't say like, oh, it says 2 damage. Well, we don't know. Is 2 a huge amount in an ESO? We just don't know. So we're pretty much going to ignore the damage amounts or even just the effect times for the most part. Percentages, on the other hand, I will probably mention them a little bit if I feel they're significant. Mainly because percentages are a lot easier to grasp in terms of how they will actually change and affect the performance of a certain skill. But as I said, all the numbers are going to change, and throughout beta and beyond release even, all of this stuff is going to be changed and balanced out. So if numbers come into play, remember this is one, a game that's not released, and two, it's going to change anyway. It's an MMO. But yeah, let's get through the blather. We're done blabbing on about God knows what. Let's get to the actual skill lines. That's what we're here for, right? Let me see here. The first one we're going to go over for the Sorcerer is Dark Magic. The ultimate ability with this guy is called Negate Magic. It's going to put down a medium-sized radius around the character, or you may even be able to aim it. It's not very clear here, to be honest. But it's going to dispel enemy magic effects that are in the area, and then enemies casting in the area when it lands are going to be silenced for about 5 seconds, it says. Now remember, the times can change, but in addition to that silence, they're going to take heavy damage. Now this is a pretty good ultimate. I mean, its cost is fairly high compared to the others, but it just seems really good, especially in a PvP scenario. But as I kind of mentioned before in the other videos, the ultimate ability on these really is like the archetype of the whole thing. So you'll see this idea of CC throughout the Dark Magic skill line. I think it's good. It obviously is going to have its uses in both PvE and PvP, but this definitely seems to be a PvP oriented kind of skill. Silences are just so deadly in that kind of content. Now onto the active abilities for the Sorcerer in this skill line. The first one is called Encase, which is a hard immobilize that's going to get multiple people in front of you. It kind of makes it sound like it's a conal effect almost, which we've seen a little bit of how they lay down that conal like red on the ground. So I wouldn't put it past them to do that. So you're going to have a kind of a short little distance in front of you. You're going to immobilize people in front. That's a pretty strong CC as well. As I said earlier, CC is going to be kind of the theme for the Dark Magic skill line. Now the next skill we have up here is called Repulse, which is a small radius in which you'll cast it, and it's going to do a knockback and then a slight snare, more CC. There's no mention of damage on this one, but I would imagine there's a little bit going on there. The next ability is yet another CC called Rune Prism. This one is going to cause a disorient, but this is also going to cause targets to have increased health regeneration. Now, what this means to me is that, I'll go ahead and say the time here. They have the disorient for 15 seconds, which is substantial. 15 seconds is quite a long time. And usually when these effects are paired with like that target gets a health regeneration, one of the easy ones to compare it to is like a polymorph in WoW. The enemy essentially just resets. They become immobile and just, they're kind of separated off from the encounter that you're in for the time that it keeps them sheeped, is what it's called in WoW. And when they come back, they're just fully healthed, and you have to take them down from the get-go again at the beginning, as if you hadn't encountered them at all. This seems to be kind of one of their skills in ESO that's going to mimic that gameplay, where you'll have a dark magic using Sorcerer, have Rune Prism, or Rune Prison rather, take out the, maybe not the highest priority target, but one that is going to cause a lot of trouble for you. So you'll use this hard CC to keep them out of the battle for a substantial amount of time, so your group can get a better hold on the situation. And it's really one of those powerful skills. I feel like it's just going to be another one of those that are kind of mandatory. I've seen this a lot in the Elder Scrolls Online skill lines that we've seen. There's a couple skills that are just really standing out to be like kind of mandatory for certain kinds of situations. Luckily though, what makes this game great with that is the skill lines are not concrete. You can change your skills kind of on the fly when you're outside of combat. So I'm sure every sorcerer that's worth their salt is going to pick up this skill in some form, fashion, maybe early, maybe late. It just depends on the content that they're doing. But I definitely imagine this is going to be one of those where it's, if you're a sorcerer and you like to do anything that's of challenge, you're going to take this skill, bar none. Now onto the next skill here. The Dark Exchange is the next skill. This is a channeled ability, and it's essentially just a drain life and magicka and stamina. It just does all of those. It's got no cost by the looks. This is one of the only spells I've seen in the game that have no cost. It has a substantial channel time, but the fact is this is just a free gain of health, magicka, and stamina. That's really powerful. It is coming in at a later level than the other ones, as you would expect. It comes in quite a substantial amount of time after the beginning of the games, because it's not something that's going to be OP from level 1, but it's really strong. This is going to be one of those I feel is going to shape some people's playstyles, because some people really like that idea of being able to drain life, and so you're hurting an opponent but helping yourself. That seems really, really cool to me. Now, the next ability they have up after Dark Exchange is called Daedric Mines. Now, this one is a good bit interesting compared to the others that have come before it. This is going to summon 3 mines, and it's going to take these mines 3 seconds to arm. And then they're going to explode, presumably when something comes into contact with them. And then enemies damaged by the mines are also then immobilized for a second or two. This is a pretty cool spell, because it's one of the only ones that mentions like damage and really in any capacity, to be honest. But it's also got that CC mechanic, which is just really prevalent in the dark magic tree. I think that's a really cool high-level spell, and it could have some interesting uses for sure. It's not very clear how the mines are spread. Like, are they just going to drop right in front of you? I would hope what they do is allow you to place them, like you'll have a much larger radius that you can utilize as you stand here, and that's the distance you can place a mine, and you can place 3 mines in 3 separate locations. That would make it a lot more potent, a lot more useful, and could definitely have some crazy uses. But even still, I think that's going to be a skill you'll see some higher level play come out of for sure. Now onto the passive abilities for the dark magic skill tree. The first one here is called Unholy Knowledge. It's going to essentially just reduce magicka and stamina costs by a couple percent. It's fairly bland passive ability. You've got Blood Magic coming up next, which is hitting an enemy with one of your dark magic spells here heals you for a good chunk of your maximum health. That kind of goes alongside the Dark Exchange ability earlier, so there's a good bit of sort of exchanging their health and bolstering your own. That's pretty cool. You have Persistence coming up next, which is going to increase the duration of your dark magic spells. Again, bland, but this one I have to mention the percentage is 20%. That's substantial in MMO terms for sure, and it could really just change the way that you play, because you have those extra long durations, especially when it comes to doing like rotational things, which is typical in MMOs. If you have your rotation down, and then you'll have to, once you get this ability, for example, your timers will be different, so you'll have to change your playstyle a little bit, but it's very potent. And then finally, the last one they have here is called Exploitation, which increases the critical strike rating by 15%, I'll just say the percentage, when attacking targets affected by Daedric magic. this is a little bit odd, I have to say. It's like the only one that is really going out there and saying, here's straight damage when you have your other abilities in play. Now, don't get me wrong, that's a strong ability, because odds are you're going to be playing these abilities kind of one after the other, keeping stuff really pinned down. It still seems odd though, because it doesn't really fit with the whole theme of the dark magic tree. It's strong. We'll see what happens with it. It could be used in a hybrid build is really what I'm foreseeing. Like somebody who wants to go with a heavy weapon damage or something, but utilize the heavy CCs from dark magic. I can really see that being a possibility with exploitation. But yeah, so what do I think of dark magic? Well, overall, the skill line, it really reminds me of a warlock or necromancer without the minions, and it's much more focused on the life drains compared to the minion play that you usually see in MMOs. And it's definitely got a heavy sense of crowd control, which I'm sure you've learned throughout this. It's just littered with it everywhere, pretty much. Every skill has some form of CC attached to it, just about. And as such, it looks like it'll be really powerful in PvP. It has its uses in PvE, don't get me wrong. CC can be very potent. Rune Prison seems to be a really good one. I would imagine the ultimate ability can be useful as well in PvE circumstances. But CC just has this way about being the upper tier, highest of the high kind of abilities. CC trumps everything else in PvP, and as such, I really foresee most of these abilities having really good use in the PvP front. Now, I have to say, outside of the PvP situations, I do think there's still some seriously powerful skills that are going to entice some players to kind of hybrid themselves with the dark magic skill line if they prefer another skill line as like their main. The CCs here are just really good. As I kind of mentioned before, the Rune Prison I think is going to be a must-take kind of ability in certain encounter situations. The exploitation looks good, especially if you're, again, hybriding to use a weapon. I really foresee that being its main usefulness there. As for the ultimate, I think it's going to be one of those that are going to be maybe not on the same level as Rune Prison in terms of all sorcerers must take, but I feel like it's going to be one of those, okay, I've gotten my preferred ultimate for most content, okay, now I need negate magic for certain other circumstances, because the silence that can come out of that is really good. I can imagine some boss encounters, for example, that have like heavy magic casting mobs all over the place. The silence that can come from that, along with the heavy damage to get rid of them, could be really, really useful in a raid style scenario or a dungeon scenario as well. So let's move on to the next one here. What is the next skill line? Well, the next skill line is Daedric Summoning, which is kind of the other half of the Warlock slash Necromancer that they started with Dark Magic. So let's get into Daedric Summoning. What is the ultimate ability? Well, it's Summon Storm Atronach, which is going to put down a immobile Storm Atronach kind of statuesque sitting in an area for a good amount of time, and then in the area, all enemies that are stuck in there are going to be stunned for a good amount of seconds while also taking shock damage. I would say it's probably very potent AoE, but it's not nearly as impressive in my book as the silence that came from negate magic. I'm sure this is going to be a very powerful ability, but it just seems kind of bland. It's like just a sit it down kind of AoE attack. Now some people are all for that. I actually enjoy doing the big AoE ultimate abilities myself, but it just seems kind of odd. I don't know, maybe I'm just not a fan of the like dropping a minion down and then he can't move. I think maybe that's why I don't like it so much, but I'm sure it'll be powerful, as I said, and as you would expect with Daedric Summoning, the rest of the skills are going to be around summoning stuff just like the ultimate was. So let's get right into the active abilities. The very first one here is Unstable Familiar. Summon a familiar to attack enemies for 1 minute. Now I wanted to mention the 1 minute thing because usually there's this thing with fantasy MMOs where summoning creatures is like a thing of semi-permanence, where they die and then you resurrect them. Whereas here, they make sure to put a timer on the unstable familiar. So it's more of a use it now in the situation and then recast it later, instead of having it sit there and just be for you all the time and then you just leave it to do its thing. Here, it's a little bit more active. I feel like that kind of goes alongside their just whole ideal with fighting in this game, where it's going to be a lot more active combat compared to previous MMOs. And I think this is a good call by them, because it makes it more active, as I said. Now the next one here is called Daedric Curse. Enemy cursed for 6 seconds. When effect completes, all nearby enemies take magic damage. Now I wanted to mention the 6 seconds because 6 seconds and above in MMO terms is usually just a fairly long time. Like, it doesn't seem like a long time, but 6 seconds can take ages. So there's going to be a little bit of planning that's going to go into the Daedric Curse in my mind. They also mentioned that only one curse may be active at a single time, so there will be some choices going on in the curse front. Also, the AoE that can come from this seems very cool. It reminds me of some of the abilities from WoW that the Warlock had. I think it was called Seed of Corruption or something like that. I believe that's what it was called, where it would just kind of hit one thing and then spread. I believe that's the ability I'm thinking of. That seems very cool. I'm a fan of that kind of ability. It'll just be some basic AoE for this skill line. Now, back to summoning things to help us out. The next skill is called Summon Winged Twilight. You're going to summon a Winged Twilight to attack nearby enemies, again, for 1 minute. This minion, on the other hand, though, has a taunt. And one of the other things I want to mention as well is there doesn't seem to be, unlike the curse, any mention of a limiter. So I would expect Daedric Summoning to allow multiple minions on screen at one time, especially because they have this 1 minute timer. So instead of just you firing one and then you do all your other spells, and then when it dies you summon another one, in this you're going to have to pump out one and pump out another and be strategic about it. This guy, the Summon Winged Twilight, is going to be kind of your tanky taunt minion. That can be very useful, but I imagine the Unstable Familiar will probably do more damage than that guy. Now onto the next skill, which is called Bound Armor. Now this is going to be a toggle on and off ability, which is just going to drain magicka while you're in it, I presume. But it also is going to lower your magicka regeneration by a good chunk. They mentioned 25%, so about a fourth to a half, I would imagine, by the release of the game. So this is going to be a pretty potent defensive skill. It doesn't really fit with the Daedric Summoning thing, but I think this is where they've decided to put their conjuring skills is in with this ability, and the one that follows, actually, which is Conjured Ward. Both of those skills have this sense of, well, we don't know where to put the Conjuring skill line in ESO. We're going to put some of those in the Daedric Summoning skill line. With Conjured Ward, though, go ahead and talk about that ability. It's going to be a ward you put out on yourself, as you would imagine, but as you cast it, it also is going to put all your summoned creatures in this warded bubble as well. And the ward itself is going to absorb about 75% of the damage taken. Now, 75%, as I said with percentages at the beginning, it gives a better focus. This is going to suck up 3/4 of all the damage that you take. That is a ton. And it can be really, really useful. I imagine if you have multiple minions on screen, you can throw out the Conjured Ward thing, and it is just going to really turn the tide of battle. It's a potent skill. That's all there is to say about it. And again, it follows that line of, well, just conjuring skills, where it's going to be an ESO, it's going to get in the Daedric Summoning skill line. Now onto the passive abilities for the Daedric Summoning skill line. The first one here is called Rebate, which is going to make you receive 12% max magicka when one of your summons is killed. Again, 12%, the percentage is there. It's a hefty amount, about 1/10 or a little bit more, depending on how they tweak the ability by the time the game comes out. 12 is a good amount, I would expect. Plus, it makes it so that your summons, when they die, are actually useful, which I would have expected from the skill line. Now, the next one is called Power Stone, which is going to, the ultimate abilities you have, it's going to reduce the cost of casting one of them by a hefty percentage as well. I think I've seen Power Stone in a lot of other skill lines as well. It seems very powerful, but it's not quite in every single one, so I'm not sure what's going on with that. It makes me wonder if it's maybe even a testing ability, if they can see how that works, like lowering ultimate cost. It's interesting because it could potentially get into some crazy territory where ultimates are spammed a little bit too often, so we'll see what happens with that. Now the next ability here under the passives is called Daedric Protection. It's going to increase your health regeneration by about 1/5 of your total ability, or not total ability, your total health, while you have any summoning ability slotted. I would imagine these do not stack, so you cannot put like 3 summoning summons in your hotbar and then just be near invincible because you have so much health regeneration. But that's still a pretty potent skill. It allows you to have some survivability. And then finally, Expert Summoner is the last passive here. And this one is your summoned creatures gain the following bonuses. Now, your Winged Twilight, which is the taunt one, is going to get an extra 30 seconds duration. It says 50%, so assuming they stay with the 1 minute there, you're going to get a minute and a half. The Familiar is going to allow extra movement speed by about 1/5 of their total, which is a good amount. That's typical MMO stuff as well. If you have like a melee-based pet or minion on the field, they usually give you like a speed bonus when you're in the higher levels, because it helps combat the idea that they cannot keep up with mobs that are being kited and stuff like that. So that's helpful to keep that melee guy on the enemies you're trying to attack. And then finally, the ultimate Atronach is going to get a pretty hefty range boost to the radius it affects its enemies and does some shock damage. It's pretty potent stuff, especially with that extra AoE distance. Now, like the Dark Magic skill, the Daedric Summoning skill line has a very Necromancer or Warlock feel to it, just like the Dark Magic one, but with the focus on minions, obviously. It's kind of it almost seems like the Dark Magic and the Daedric Summoning were potentially one like skill line, or maybe even one separate class, but they decided to split it off and put it under the Sorcerer skill line. I'm not sure how I like that, because it does seem like you're missing one half or the other. I'm not sure. I don't really play the Warlock or Necromancer type classes in these games, so maybe I'm just missing it. Maybe it's a lot more straightforward. Like, some people just really like minions, and some people just really like the drained life and dark magic and curses stuff. So we'll see how that goes. This one is a lot more focused than the Dark Magic skill line. There's a little bit of CC in it, but it's not nearly as much as the Dark Magic skill line. I'm thinking that after saying about the Daedric skill line and the Dark Magic kind of being two parts of the same whole, I feel like when I look at it now, that maybe what they're going for is, instead of making people play a class and then pick which one they want by having them in separate skill lines, they will allow people, since you can hybrid between them, to, oh, I want to play a Warlock, let's go into the Daedric Summoning and Dark skill lines and pick and choose what I want, and that way they can just really craft their sort of necromantic fantasies, I guess, in the character that creates. So I guess on one hand, I do think it was a little bit forced in the separation. It doesn't seem like all that natural that you would separate these two without it being under a separate class, maybe. But the whole skill line system that they have in Elder Scrolls Online, I guess, lends itself well to people being able to customize anyway, so it's not too much of a worry. I do want to add, finally, though, again, that if you're looking for the Conjuring skill line in Elder Scrolls Online, this is pretty much all you're going to get. There's no evidence so far that in the current form that ESO is in, that Conjuring Magic is going to make any sort of appearance outside of Bound Armor and Conjured Ward on the Daedric Summoning. And maybe there's some other Conjuring skills on the other classes, or maybe even the armors and stuff like that give you the passive abilities. But as far as I can tell, this is pretty much all you're going to get. This is the only one that even closely resembles a Conjuring skill line that you were kind of looking for. That said, with an MMO, you can always expect changes and additions to be added. So I wouldn't put it past them too much if in the future there's a lot of people wanting a separate Conjuring skill line. I wouldn't put it past them to add that to the game. So keep your hopes up. If you're really wanting a Conjuring specific skill line, it could come in the future. But as of now, this is pretty much what you're going to get. So let's get on to the final skill line, shall we? Let's see here. It's called Storm Calling, and the ultimate ability for this one, as you would imagine, involves lightning. It's called Overload, which is going to be an instant cast, so there's no charge up time on this. It's a good bit cheaper than its, I guess, brothers and sisters in the ultimate category. While this is toggled, which means that you're just going to, while it's on, do damage, but also drain from your magical pool. What this is going to do while you have it toggled on is going to cause light and heavy attacks from your weapons are going to be replaced with these empowered versions of those attacks that are going to cost ultimate. So instead of it toggling on and then it automatically drains, what's going to happen is you're going to be utilizing your weapon strikes then to do just like powered up attacks with the overload on, and presumably just shock people to death with your melee or your staff or whatever. And that's really cool. I'm a fan of that ability. That's one of those that is, it's different than it's sort of competing ultimates from the class. And of the three, I think this one is the one I would probably play with most of the time. It just seems really cool to me. Maybe it's not the most effective because the other ones have a little bit of CC, and the Storm Atronach has a good bit of AoE. But this one seems like I don't know. This one really speaks to me from the DPS person that I am. This one seems like the one I have my, oh man, I'm coming up to, we need to burn the boss really quickly portion of the encounter, throw on my overload and just bust out ridiculous DPS for a couple seconds. That really speaks to me. So I'm a fan of overload. Now onto the active abilities. Goodness gracious, having issues talking today. The active abilities for the Storm Calling skill line starts off with Mage's Fury, which is going to deal some shock damage, but then it also is going to have this sort of execute style ability that you would expect, or kill shot kind of ability in WoW terms, where once they hit a certain threshold of health, usually by the 20% or 15% health mark, your abilities, or this ability in particular, is going to do like quadruple the damage. It's going to have that style ability. So Mage's Fury is going to be an okay attack for the most part, but then once enemies get below a certain threshold of health, you can use this as a way to just very quickly pound them to death. The next ability here is called Bolt Escape. Now this is going to stun enemies that are nearby, but most importantly what this really does is it's going to teleport you forward in the way that you're facing a good distance. And I have to say it now before I forget, as far as any information is concerned with this game, this is the only teleport style ability. This is the only blink, as you would call it in MMO terms, and that is both surprising and makes the skill super powerful because there's not others like it. It's one of a kind as of right now. I'm not sure if that will be changed. I kind of hope it does, because it would make sorcerers really a pain in the ass to deal with. But I also kind of like the idea that maybe sorcerers are the only ones that can utilize this teleportation, because in the lore I guess it would make the most sense. But that is a very potent skill, and kind of like the Rune Prison, that's mandatory. I feel like Bolt Escape is going to be up there, if not more important, because this will have a lot more uses in my opinion. Now the next ability is called Lightning Splash. This is going to leave a pool of flowing lightning that for a short duration is going to deal damage to anything that stands in it, as you would expect. But also this is going to give a conduit, a lightning conduit active ability when an ally jumps into the pool and uses a synergy. It's going to then shock all the enemies in the pool for a good chunk of extra damage. Now, as far as I can tell, and now maybe my mind is just going, but this is the only synergy that I've seen through the Sorcerer tree, which is very surprising, because usually when there's this kind of stuff where the mage or sorcerer archetype is in a game, they have that AoE that everyone can interact with, and they become like the pillar of doing the synergy or the teamwork attacks. And in this is the only one that I've seen so far, so I'm very surprised by that. As for the skill itself, I think it's going to be pretty strong. It's just another AoE ability for the sorcerer. I imagine that, coupled with the ultimate from the Daedric Summoning Tree, could potentially do a lot of AoE damage in those kinds of situations. Now the next ability is fairly bland, but pretty potent as well. just called Surge, and for a good number of seconds, about a third of a minute almost, it's going to increase your power value. Now the number is insignificant, but the fact is this is going to be an ability you cast that has a hefty cost, but is going to boost your damage for a good bit. And I feel like this is going to be one of those that you use in tandem with your Overload and maybe any other kind of abilities that boost your damage, and then you can just really lay on some hurt. Again, it's going to cost a hefty amount of magicka to cast it, but you're going to be able to really pump out some damage. So it's going to have to be one of those situations where you weigh the sort of cause and effect of what you're going to do. You're going to put yourself in a situation where you don't have the magicka to use a bolt escape, for example, to escape a situation where you're going to die, or you don't have the magicka to continue your sort of rotational ability string that you have going on. But it could then also be offset by the fact you're going to do tons of damage. So it's going to be a really cool ability. I think it's going to be one of those that are utilized by the upper tier of player very well, and they're just going to really bolster their damage per second with that guy. Now finally is Lightning Form, which is going to, for a couple seconds, cause you to take a good bit of less damage. You're going to pretty much turn into this lightning form and take about half as much damage as you normally would. And then in addition to that, you're going to deal a little bit of damage to the enemies around you. Now, the damage seems insignificant. It's just kind of added on there to make it so that it's not useless in the DPS front, I guess. But more importantly, this is your survival skill for the tree. That along with Bolt Escape, I think this is going to be the class that you can play pretty like high risk, high reward. I'm pretty sure will be the way to go with this tree if you stick to it very concretely and very linear. You stick to most of the skills in this tree when you make your character. You're going to be able to use this skill along with the Bolt Escape and just be very hard to kill, despite being able to build yourself in a way that is very glass cannon, they would say. So I imagine that skill is going to be pretty potent and very helpful in the right situations as well. Now onto the passive abilities finally. The first one here is called Capacitor, which is just going to increase your magicka regeneration by a little bit. Pretty bland stuff, but you know what? I'll take it. The next one here is called Energized. This is going to increase the damage of your lightning magic abilities by a small percentage. Again, like Capacitor, is pretty bland, but potent, and I'll take it. Disintegrate is the next one. Your lightning spells have a 10% chance to instantly disintegrate low health targets. This is the cool ability. I really like this one. This, alongside the ability of Mage's Fury, kind of makes the Storm Calling tree this like burst down the low health target kind of thing. In particular, I can foresee AoE situations where you'll use an ability like Lightning Splash, and you'll have a lot of low health enemies you're getting down, and then they'll hit that like 10% mark or 20% mark, and then they'll just explode into nothingness. You'll just take out so much damage so quickly because of Disintegrate and your Mage's Fury and your AoE. It's a really cool passive. I really like that, and I don't think there's been anything quite like it so far going through the classes. Now finally is Expert Mage, which is very bland, I have to say, but incredibly potent, with reduce the cost of your lightning spells by 10%. Again, it's very bland. This seems to be the thing with ESO. They like to give like a very nice peppering of interesting with bland in the passives department, with the last one, the last one you would unlock anyway, being a very potent but very bland kind of passive. Overall, I have to say that the Storm Calling is definitely the most typical mage kind of character. It fits the I'm a sorcerer, I'm a mage, casting magic from afar archetype very well, with lightning being the obvious theme. Compared to the other two, it's definitely the most linear as well, and it's definitely the most focused skill line, with pretty much every skill encapsulating the idea of I'm a lightning wielder and I'm throwing around the power of a storm. There's quite a bit of AoE, that's to be expected with a sorcerer mage-like character. In typical fantasy archetyping going on with this guy, it's going to fit all those things that you would expect from a mage or a long-range caster that the other two skill lines just don't have. You'll be able to throw your abilities from afar and do some ranged magic damage. So I'm sure this is going to appeal to those guys. And then finally, I have to say that the Bolt Escape, I cannot move past this ability because it is the only one in the game. It is the only Blink style ability at the moment. And for anyone that's played an MMO or even like a MOBA or pretty much any game where there's some competitive elements, if there's a Blink ability, you're going to have the upper hand. The ability to instantaneously escape from harm, or even close a gap to get to your enemy quicker, is absolutely huge. And in PvP, it is a game changer. It is absolutely game changing. It is up there with CCs in terms of power. And in the right hands, it's definitely going to be one of those that can change an encounter or a PvP match, and it just really changed the flow of how something goes, because somebody can get the jump on you, and if you have set yourself up well to counter with a Bolt Escape and then go into your own combo on somebody, it can just really shake things up. And it's going to be one of those that I expect to be mandatory for all sorcerers, and it's going to be in every sorcerer PvP build bar none. It's going to be one of those that if you're a sorcerer, you play PvP in any capacity, you're going to have Bolt Escape on one of your hot bars, if not both. Goodness, hot boars. I must be thinking of bacon or something. So my final thoughts then on the sorcerer. Overall, I think they've done a pretty good job of allowing multiple different play types going on. In particular, the weapon types. I feel like they've really done a pretty good job of balancing out what could happen, both for melee and ranged fighters, and really any of the skills from all of the 3 skill lines available could be used in some form or fashion in the playstyle you want to build. And overall, that's really what they're going for with the skill lines, right? So I feel like that's a good success on the part of Zenimax, that they've done well to actually deliver on their promise to. In a sorcerer's skill lines, you have a lot of potential to build a class and a character that you really want to. Now, of the classes covered so far, that being Dragon Knight, Templar, and now the Sorcerer, with only the Nightblade to go, I have to admit that the Sorcerer is the one that's kept my attention the longest, specifically the Storm Calling skill line, which we just went over. Now, I really hope that the runes, I've mentioned this before, I really hope that the runes that are weapons are going to be in the game still. And it's one of the things that have kind of led me back to the Sorcerer time and time again, because I really like this idea of having the runes, which for those who may have missed it in the past, are supposed to be like ESO's take on wands, for example, but they'll be like inscribed on your hand or on your palm or something like that, and it will be kind of this dual wield mage fighter who can fight from mid to close range with magic by having these runes inscribed on their person. I've always liked the idea of having that coupled with a mix of light and medium armor, so that you can stay mobile, but you'll kind of be glass cannon while also having the ability to stay close and using your weapons with my skills. It seems like it could be a lot of fun. But even still, even if runes don't make it in the game, and I really hope they do, because it's the one that I really want to play the most, I still think you could use that same idea of being an up-close glass cannon kind of fighter, using the mobility of Bolt Escape, and your survivability maybe the lightning form, and just a multitude of different skills there, and just go for a full-on burst down two-handed wielding Stormcaller, for example. That sounds like a lot of fun to me. So hopefully runes are in the game, but you know what, I can still play my up-close badass mage who doesn't give a damn about getting hit. He is going to wreck your face so quickly. So that'll do it for me, guys. Pretty much that's all there is to the Sorcerer. That's my thoughts and opinions on that. Let me know down in the comments below what you think of the Sorcerer and the skills that they have available. Plus, which ones do you guys find to be your favorite? Which ones do you think you'll utilize in a build for yourself if you're interested in playing a Sorcerer in Elder Scrolls Online? Now, before I go, I pretty much have to say this every time. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this even a little bit and found it a tiny bit informative, I'd very much appreciate a like, a subscribe, a comment down below on anything Elder Scrolls Online or gaming related at all. Thanks again for watching, guys. This has been Pulse, and I will see you on the next one. See ya.